But Chance is now 7 years old, and as most pit bulls, I hope he is enjoying his life as a house hippo couch potato with a very loving family. Welcome back, True Colored Crime fans. I'm your host, Dr. Lisa Fox. I want to take this opportunity to direct you to our website, www.truecoloredcrime.com. We plan to have merchandise at some point that will provide donations to specific animal-related charities. These charities are listed on the website, and if you care to make a donation, please make that firsthand. Feel free to send us a message with your own charity's information or any case suggestions. I also invite you to follow us, like us, comment, and give us some 5-star reviews on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I do this to give voice to the animals and bring awareness to the issue of animal abuse. Warning, this podcast contains graphic and traumatic depictions of real-life animal abuse cases. Listener discretion is advised. So hello and welcome back. I'm your host, Dr. Lisa Fox, as I said, and this is the special holiday episode of True Colored Crime. On December 25th, 2015, Christmas Day, just after dinner, Camille and her friends gathered in their backyard in Michigan City, Indiana, to celebrate the holiday. While in the backyard, much to their shock, a small, white pit bull puppy managed to drag himself up to them. They noted that not only was this poor creature obviously injured in the hind end, but his breathing was also greatly restricted because his mouth had been taped shut. The group rushed the small, emaciated dog to the emergency vet nearby. This happens to be Dr. Maggie Sharp, who we will hopefully have an interview with on the podcast, so stay tuned for that as well. According to the facts and procedural history section of Cope v. State, which I will delve into more later, the puppy in question was an approximately 5-month-old pit bull. He was found with his muzzle taped shut with electrical tape, and because his airway was restricted, he was foaming at the mouth. He was emaciated or underweight, and he was dragging both rear legs with no ability to stand on his own. According to his vet report, the tape had been so tight and had been in place for such a period of time that the skin of his muzzle had become necrotic, or in other words, the blood flow had been cut off for long enough to cause the tissue around his muzzle to die off. Because of this, the tape had to be cut all the way to the gum tissue, and the pup, now affectionately known as Chance, was suffering an infection of the oral tissues. So in veterinary forensics by Melinda Merck, DVM, ligatures are not uncommon forms of abuse and cause injury dependent upon the body part, the type of ligature, and the length of time the ligature remains in place, as well as the amount of struggle from the victim. Ligatures cause constriction, and they compress the skin and involve blood vessels, causing tissue swelling and edema, which is fluid accumulation, which in turn stops the tissue from receiving any oxygen and therefore causes the tissue to die, or in other words, necrose. In this case, the ligature, or electrical tape, was still present. But if that weren't the case, the GIS, Geographic Information System, has a database of patterns of entrapment caused by netting in marine mammals that may be of some use in identifying the ligature material. Looking at the embedded collar data, we know that at 3 to 5 days after injury of a collar that is embedded into the neck of an animal, the granulation or scar tissue begins to form at a rate of 0.4 to 1 millimeter per day. So, if needed, the wound can be biopsied and histopathologically, so under a microscope, we can examine this to determine a timeline of when the ligature was placed on the animal based on the amount of healing that started to take place. We also note that Chance was showing signs of emaciation. I will be asking further about Chance and what we saw or what was seen in the ER when he first came in. So stay tuned for that interview. So this was all from the case, which I found online. So he was showing signs of emaciation, and young animals like Chance have higher nutritional demands. And so they can show signs of starvation more quickly and more profoundly than adult animals. Not only did Chance need to undergo extensive surgery for his wounds, but due to the starvation, he also had to be carefully brought back into health slowly to prevent a syndrome called refeeding syndrome. The starvation can also cause ulceration in the mouth because the cell turnover or healing rate of the mucous membranes in the mouth are the fastest in the body, and they actually need more protein to be able to heal that fast. This also leads to a decreased immune response, leading to decreased IgA secretion or antibody secretion, which can lead to fungal or bacterial infection and can increase the speed of dental disease. Chance had even more injuries that required immediate attention. Both of his hind limbs were broken. Each were femoral fractures, which are fractures involving the femur of the leg, so the top bone of the leg. And one was actually into the joint space of the hip. So he had severe hip joint issues due to these fractures, and he was rushed into surgery at a specialty hospital to repair his fractures. And he was hospitalized and surgically treated for the wounds around his mouth. And during his rehabilitation period, he underwent hydrotherapy, low level laser therapy, and some other things that make me really happy as a holistic veterinarian. From multiple resources, it states that these injuries were caused by blunt force trauma, which leads us to the perpetrator in the case. This all really started 11 days or more before Chance's first Christmas. The story begins with domestic threats and violence to Richard Cope's ex-wife. Cope is the person that inflicted this nightmare on a defenseless puppy. According to his appeal case, Cope v. State, 11 days prior to hurting Chance, Cope left a voicemail on his ex-wife's phone threatening, and I quote, "Most of the snitches that I know don't live very long. You are going to get yours. If you ever snitch on me to the cops again, you are going to wake up and your life will be very different. That shit you pulled on me cost $1,500 and you're going to see the consequences of that." Now, from reading the rest of the case, I believe that this had to do with his ex-wife telling the police of his green thumb in regards to the pot plants growing in his home. By December 22nd, he had called his ex-wife over 90 times, and the police officer that met with him that day noted that, quote, "his white puppy was sitting on the couch and there was nothing wrong with it." After Chance was found, Cope ran away to Texas, and he had to be pursued, caught, and extradited back to Indiana. When questioned, he stated that he placed the tape on the pup's mouth because it was biting him, and he kicked the pup and threw him into the garage. According to a 2020 article in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health, violence towards animals is such a strong predictor of impending violence on humans that it is termed the link. This link dates all the way back to the 13th century. In 1987, animal cruelty was added to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM 3R, as a symptom of conduct disorder, and this was retained in the DSM 5 in 2013. In 1981, a study by Hutton showed that 82% of families known to the RSPCA, much like the European version of the ASPCA, for animal abuse or neglect were also known to social services for instances of child abuse and neglect. This was not Cope's first offense. In a pre-sentence investigation report, it lists that Cope was diagnosed with ADHD at age 12, was diagnosed as bipolar at age 13, and while doing time in a federal prison, he was sexually abused, which caused him to have PTSD. He was convicted of criminal conversion, aka theft, just after his high school years in 1985, forgery in 88, possession of a controlled substance in 89, battery against a person less than 13 years of age, resulting in injury in 92 when he was 26 years old, insurance fraud, bank robbery, public intoxication, driving while intoxicated, growing marijuana, driving without a license, and on and on and on. He sounds like a real peach, doesn't he? They also found that he was placed on probation 6 times, 3 of which he was released unsatisfactorily. During the sentencing, the court stated the injury and disregard for the animal was significant. He was not only left outside in the winter weather for hours, his hips were broken. In addition to that, his mouth was taped shut so that even if he could manage to get shelter or food or water, he would not have been able to eat or drink. He was subsequently charged on 4 counts. Count 1, torturing or mutilating a vertebrate animal as a level 6 felony. Count 2, cruelty to an animal as a Class A misdemeanor. Count 3, animal neglect and abandonment as a Class A misdemeanor. And count 4, the same. In total, he was sentenced to 24 months for intimidation to be served consecutively, with 12 months for torturing and mutilating a vertebrate animal and 12 months for cruelty to an animal. 48 months or 4 years in total. He was also ordered to pay $3,895 for Chance's surgery bills and the $1,163 cost to have him extradited from Texas back to Indiana. But don't worry, his short sentence was well deserved. And after all, he said, and I quote, "I think I'd like to apologize for each and every person that came here, as my actions are not indicative of the character of me as a person or the manner in which my parents raised me." He also tried to appeal to serve his sentence on house arrest so that he could support his son. Yeah, I almost choked on that one. The court must have well, as they stated, he left his son behind when he ran to Texas, most obviously not putting his son's welfare uppermost in his thoughts. It is a no-brainer that the court didn't fall for this and made no changes to his sentencing with his appeal. Unfortunately, Chance's abuser has been released from prison. But Chance is now 7 years old, and as most pit bulls, I hope he is enjoying his life as a house hippo couch potato with a very loving family. He still has visible scarring, but he is otherwise healed. He has a human child to love and care for him that is his bestest friend, and his survival and story is definitely a Christmas miracle. I would like to thank the Guardians of the Green Mile for their amazing efforts in putting poor Chance back together again, Dr. Maggie Sharp and her staff, at the emergency room that he was brought to, and the surgeons that did the specialized surgery on his hips. Please donate to Guardians of the Green Miles Rescue on our website at www.truecollaredcrime.com. And I hope you all have an amazing holiday season and tune back into the first Wednesday of January for episode number 4. Also, turn into the interview section of this episode to hear from Dr. Maggie Sharp and Sherry Christopher. Dr. Sharp, again, was on call in the ER when Chance was first brought in, and Sherry is the director of Guardians of the Green Mile, so generously helped fix Chance financially and find him a loving home.